Lately, I've been talking to a lot of students in my programs who really like logic games and want to take the LSAT before games are removed after the June LSAT. This makes a lot of sense to me that those who like logic games are aiming for the June test, because if you didn't like logic games, why wouldn't you wait to take the LSAT in August after they remove the games section? So if you're taking the LSAT in June, this means you probably don't love logical reasoning, or at least not as much as you like games. So if you're taking the test in June, it makes sense to focus on the section you don't like, such as logical reasoning, rather than procrastinating on this weak area by doing more of what you do like, such as games. My advice to you in this position is stop focusing on games just because you like it more, and instead focus on what you really need to be working on, like logical reasoning and reading comp. And I'm sure someone out there is feeling called out right now, like, how did he know that was me? So if that's you, drop a comment right now to let me know, and we can start giving you some accountability to help you focus on what you really need to be working on. So at this point, we've established that if you're taking the LSAT in June, you probably want to focus on logical reasoning instead, because you need the work there more than you need it in games. Of course, maybe you need help in reading comp also, in which case, same deal. Now, the thing is, if you're taking the LSAT in August or later, the importance of logical reasoning is doubled because they're replacing the logic game section with a second scored logical reasoning section. This means logical reasoning is going to be 2/3 of the test, so any gains you make there will be automatically doubled across the two sections. Of course, at LSAT Unplugged, inside our programs, we're still covering logic games in our live classes, but we're also giving additional classes on logical reasoning for those who want to give this section more focus, just because it's a weak area or because reasoning is going to be doubled starting with the August test. So if you're interested in finding out more, you can check out the links below the video to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. Now, I'm going to share with you 3 quick wins for logical reasoning you can implement right away. First is necessary assumption versus sufficient assumption questions. A lot of students are not clear on the distinction between the two, when in reality they are radically different question types. The confusion here is so bad that I've even seen some prep companies that lump them together under the catch-all category of assumption questions. This is, of course, a huge mistake because they are asking for very different things. Same goes, by the way, for the catch-all category of inference questions. There are some important distinctions within this question type. We have must be true versus most strongly supported questions that are very different in nature. Must be true is 100% required by the stimulus, whereas most strongly supported is roughly, I would say, 90 to 95% supported by the stimulus, but there's still a little bit of wiggle room there. So you want to be really clear on the difference between these two types. Again, students confuse the two. If you can get crystal clear on them, you can likely get a few raw score points pretty easily, which could translate into 5 points or more in your LSAT score converted out of 180. Another big mistake I see students make that could be a quick win if you get this concept down is that for weakened questions, weakening an argument does not mean destroying the argument. Weakening the reasoning, weakening the argument just means making the conclusion a little bit less likely given the evidence. But our standard here is not so high as to suggest that we need to make the conclusion impossible. We're just making it relatively less likely. So if we were to say, for example, that studying for the LSAT is typically associated with a higher score, we could, of course, find exceptions to that rule, but it would not negate the correlation. Now, when you're studying logical reasoning, you want to make sure you master the most common question types before working on the ones that hardly ever show up. Of course, in our courses, we cover all 15 plus logical reasoning question types, along with the most important methods of reasoning, because it's not always about question types. Now, if you're scoring below 160, you want to focus on the most common types like necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. These show up most consistently. You want to master these before getting into the rare types like evaluate the argument and parallel that show up significantly less often. However, if you're scoring 160 or above, it's time for you to take your prep to the next level and start thinking about methods of reasoning. At that point, reach out to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. You're also going to want to make sure that you're crystal clear on the methods of reasoning that will likely show up more as the LSAT changes and they remove the game section, like numbers versus percentages, absolute versus relative, and formal logic stimuli. If you'd like my help with those, again, you can check out the links below. We'd be glad to help. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.